in my last video, the Christian truther community gets duped with the Taxil hoax. I got a few comments. Some really were appreciative of it, and I think anybody who is in search of the truth would be very appreciative to be able to hear something that most quote-unquote truthers do not actually talk about. But there was one person who was talking to me about Albert Pike and the 3 World Wars. And they kept insisting that it came from the book Morals and Dogma, which I downloaded and could not find in there. And let me pause this and I'll show it to you. Okay, so I'm on the Morals and Dogma PDF that I was able to download from online. And then we can look and search this. There we go. Search this for World War. And there's absolutely 0 results to show you the word world is in here many times. This does work when you search. But World War is not mentioned in Morals and Dogma whatsoever. But you'll see by the rest of this video why that is, because it's not, the 3 World Wars was not in Morals and Dogma. Unless somebody has, he's spoken in some other terminology or something, I'm not going to read the whole book to try to figure that out. But I really don't think it is in there, which I said, you watch this video and you'll see why. So basically they were telling me that it is in the book Morals and Dogma. I'm telling them it's from the letter. It's a letter to Mazzini, which actually did not exist, which is what I'm going to be getting into in this video. I'll leave some links below to articles that you can read for more information. This one is called How Albert Pike Went from Masonic Teacher to Satanic Devil Worshipper, which I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it talks about the world wars and how it was made up. It was from Taxil, and I'm going to get into a larger article, which I'll read, that goes way more in depth and is more beneficial for this video. But one thing I wanted to read from here, it says he fought, this is about Pike, he fought for the Confederacy during the American Civil War and devoted much of his time throughout his life to helping Native American tribes make claims against the federal government, a far cry from recruiting innocent converts to help him summon Satan. I know people say he worshiped Lucifer, not Satan. They are different. Lucifer just means light bringer, and there's some people who they get confused because Jesus Christ is actually the light bringer. He's the one who brings the light to the world. He is the light coming into the world. And so the Bible actually talks to him about why is he the morning star, and Lucifer wanted to be the morning star, etc. You can see my video playlist on why there is no such thing as a physical being, Satan or Lucifer. And Satan just means the adversary. I've got articles and videos. Like I said, I sort of mentioned that in the previous video too. But you can do your own research on this, and I think it more comes from when people are in that victim mentality. They're feeling as if somebody's out to get them. There's nobody out to get people. And there's one thing I found interesting when studying the Essenes is the idea that when they talked about demons, and demons are longing for the taste of flesh, and they want you to do their bidding, and that's why people were eating animals and stuff like that with the fall and the Nephilim and all that, is the idea that demons might have been just the word they used for parasites now. So parasites do mind control people to do things. And I mean, we've talked about, on my channel, at least in the past, I've mentioned the microbiome of your gut and how it will make you long for certain foods because that's what it's used to and it wants more of that. And that's why you crave the sugary sweet stuff sometimes rather than craving more healthy foods like raw fruits and vegetables and things like that. So I think what they talked about in the Bible a lot of times is allegorical and spiritual, and people sort of took it more literal with a Satan is out to get you. And that took time. It took years. I also have an article about the at-one-ment versus atonement theory, where at the beginning everybody thought we just have to become one with God. It's something we do ourselves. Christ was an example. We can do what he did. And then it turned in over time when people let their sin control them, gave over to their lusts, into this idea that they cannot control themselves and that they're going to, be under the control of Satan or something and Satan's attacks. But it says, resist the devil and he will flee. Satan or demons, even the Clementine homilies talks about demons having no power over you if you just repent. So, we're not supposed to be sitting around thinking Satan or the devil's after us, but many people in the Christian truther community do feel like, we have to watch out for Satan and Satan worshipers and all that sort of stuff. And they gravitate towards the conspiracies. And yes, the Bible talks about conspiracies. There's stuff going on, but they have no power over us as long as you resist giving into sin. And the whole idea is you can just not sin. So you can see my videos on that. I've got tons of background about that, so feel free to research it yourself. I guess one last thing I'll say from this article, it says here, however, Pike, when he's talking about Lucifer, the light bringer, he says, Pike went on to explain that Lucifer represents free will, which was created for good, but which may serve for evil. He's already saying that, if Lucifer equals free will, then that's a good thing. And we were given free will, like I said, to resist the devil. Lucifer and the devil are not the same thing. And like I said, you can see my past videos about all that stuff. Okay, so this is the actual article that I want to read in this video. And there's 148 comments, it looks like. So if you want to go down to the comment section, you can read those. And this was posted in 2015, so this was a long time ago. And when I was hearing about the 3 world wars, I have to ask myself, why wasn't I hearing about this? Well, I feel like the Christian truthers would just look at, oh, look at this, 3 world wars predicted, and then they don't go any further. They don't ask, where did this information come from? And so that's basically the point of this video. We're going to talk about where this stuff came from. This is by Terry Melanson, and October 5th, 2010, which is interesting because it must have been updated in 2015. But it's been here for quite some time, like I said. 5 years, even if it was updated 2015. All right, so I'm going to read from this article. Or how Michael Hopt said that William Guy Carr said that Cardinal Caro E. Rodriguez of Santiago, Chile said that the cause of the world unrest said that the confessed hoaxer Gabriel Johann Pages, a.k.a. Dr. Bastille, a.k.a. Leo Taxil, said about Albert Pike and Giuseppe Mazzini in La Diabla a... I'm not even going to pronounce that part. And the pages here, it says 1892 to 1894 is the time period, and then page 605, but actually page 594 to 606. Got it? Continuing on. I don't derive any satisfaction from a debunking. I really don't. Discovering the truth is a reward in itself. Having a knack for getting to the bottom of a thing also helps with maintaining credibility. Historiography is, among other things, concerned with source criticism. And while I'm not an academically trained historian, I'm quite aware that one should strive to consult the primary source as opposed to relying on the word of secondary or even tertiary accounts. The matter at hand deals with an alleged 3 World War prediction from famed Mason, Scottish Rite Sovereign, Grand Commander Albert Pike. William Guy Carr was the key purveyor of the tale, which to me was suspicious to say the least. Off and on I've been working at it, and I've finally cracked the case. The 3 World Wars website and Carr. Let's begin with the modern popularizer of the Pike-Mazzini 1871 quote-unquote letter. In 2003, an Englishman by the name of Michael Hopt launched his website, The 3 World Wars, which I'll click on so that you can see it just in case you are interested. All right. I'll leave a link below and you can check it out. So anyway, he launched his website in response to jihadist terrorism and the American invasion of Iraq, backed by the knowledge gleaned from a conspiratorial view of history and an obvious impending cataclysm. The words of William Guy Carr attributed to Albert Pike seemed to precisely predict the dire circumstances unfolding in the Middle East. So there's going to be a lot of quotes here. Basically, the first quote is from the Michael Hopt website, 3 World Wars, and then he quotes others. So we're going to continue on here and just read this and try to watch the flow of the quotes here. All right, so this is from 3worldwars.com. One message that Albert Pike received from his quote-unquote spirit guide and which in reality we know to be a demonic vision, he described in a letter that he wrote to Mazzini, dated August 15, 1871. This letter graphically outlined plans for 3 world wars that were seen as necessary to bring about the one world order, and we can marvel at how accurately it has predicted events that have already taken place. This is not because the devil has powers of prophecy, but because his agents have undertaken to manipulate political events to closely follow his designs. For a short time, this letter was on display in the British Museum Library in London, and it was copied by William Guy Carr, former intelligence officer in the Royal Canadian Navy. Another quote, "The First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the czars in Russia and of making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. The divergences caused by the agents of the Illuminati between the British and Germanic empires will be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions. So that's the end of that quote and so now we're going back to the 3 World Wars website words here. Students of history will recognize that the political alliances of England on one side and Germany on the other, forged between 1871 and 1898 by Otto von Bismarck, co-conspirator of Albert Pike, were instrumental in bringing about the First World War." So back to the quote-unquote letter. "The Second World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the fascists and the political Zionists. This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel and Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would be then restrained and held in check until the time when we would need it for the final social cataclysm." So back to the 3 World Wars commentary. "After this Second World War, communism was made strong enough to begin taking over weaker governments. In 1945, at the Potsdam Conference between Truman, Churchill, and Stalin, a large portion of Europe was simply handed over to Russia. And on the other side of the world, the aftermath of the war with Japan helped to sweep the tide of communism into China." So here's the Third World War, supposedly. "The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agentur of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and political Zionism, the State of Israel, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. Then, everywhere, the citizens, obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries, will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out into the public view. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time." Back to the 3 World Wars text. "Since the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, world events in the Middle East show a growing unrest and instability between Jews and Arabs. This is completely in line with the call for a Third World War to be fought between the two and their allies on both sides. This Third World War is still to come, and recent events show us that it is not far off." So that's Michael Haupt, who was Albert Pike, from his website about the 3 World Wars. And so I'm going to scroll down here. So back to the original author of this article about this. Quote here. "Notice the quotes attributed to Carr, who in turn is supposedly citing Pike verbatim. Although there is no citation from Haupt, e.g. book and page number, it was pretty easy to track down from where it had originated. The First World War must, the Second World War must, and the Third World War must is a paraphrased excerpt from William Guy Carr's book, Pawns in the Game. and a reprint of the 1958 edition here. Only Carr doesn't use quotes to signal a direct quote from the letter, as Haupt had deemed necessary to insert all by himself. The former does indeed claim that the 3 world wars was prophesied in the letter, but he doesn't actually go so far as to put quotations around it, so as to definitely attribute those specific words as occurring verbatim in said letter. So basically, the author of the 3 World Wars website put quotes around these words as if they were a direct quotation when they were not. Pawns in the Game is also available online, so I'll leave a link below if you want to read Pawns in the Game. I don't know why you would after we get through the end of the article, though, but if you want to find this for yourself, you can research for yourself. So, continuing on in this article, Carr maintains a curious middle ground. Observe the following. Now, this is a quote from Carr, and he also puts ellipses in where he's skipping some, so it's not going to be in the exact when you see the ellipses. Like 20th century, it doesn't go straight to Pike's plan, right? So that's what the ellipses means. If you want to research this yourself, you could just copy this part and look it up in the PDF file that I'll leave a link below too, and you can find it for yourself there. All right, so, quote, between 1859 and 1871, he worked out the details of a military blueprint for 3 world wars and 3 major revolutions, which he considered would further the conspiracy to its final stage during the 20th century. Pike's plan was as simple as it has proved effective. He required that communism, Nazism, political Zionism, and other international movements be organized and used to foment the 3 global wars and 3 major revolutions. The First World War was to be fought so as to enable the Illuminati to overthrow the powers of the Tsars in Russia and turn that country into the stronghold of atheistic communism. The differences stirred up by the agentur of the Illuminati between the British and German empires were to be used to foment this war. After the war ended, communism was to be built up and used to destroy other governments and weaken religions. World War II was to be fomented by using the differences between fascists and political Zionists. This war was to be fought so that Nazism would be destroyed and the power of political Zionism increased so that the sovereign state of Israel could be established in Palestine. During World War II, international communism was to be built up until it equaled in strength that of united Christendom. At this point, it was to be contained and kept in check until required for the final social cataclysm. Can any informed person deny Roosevelt and Churchill did not put this policy into effect? World War III is to be fomented by using the differences the agentur of the Illuminati stir up between political Zionists and the leaders of the Muslim world. The war is to be directed in such a manner that Islam, the Arab world including Mohammedanism, and political Zionism including the State of Israel will destroy themselves while at the same time the remaining nations, once more divided against each other on this issue, will be forced to fight themselves into a state of complete exhaustion, physically, mentally, spiritually, and economically. Can any unbiased and reasoning person deny that the intrigue now going on in the near, middle, and far east isn't designed to accomplish this devilish purpose? William Guy Carr, Pawns in the Game. And there's the references down there. I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. As is obvious, these are not direct quotes, rather only a claim. And there's no citation for these revelations either. When exactly did Pike supposedly lay out his master conspiracy? And where can one read the complete, unedited original? On the next page, however, there is a small quote from the mysterious alleged letter dated August 15th, 1871. So this is from Pawns in the Game. Like I said, this is right here. So I'll leave that link below. On August 15th, 1871, Pike told Mazzini that after the World War III is ended, those who aspire to undisputed world domination will provide the greatest social cataclysm the world has ever known. We quote his own written words taken from the letter catalogued in the British Museum Library, London, England. Here's another quote, obviously, from that. We shall unleash the nihilists and atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm which in all its horror will show clearly the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery and of the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will be from that moment without compass, direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view, a manifestation which will result from the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. William Guy Carr, Pawns in the Game. Continuing on here. Here we have a direct quote from the elusive letter, and again, with no precise citation, only the assertion that it is held in the British Museum. Subheading: Carr, Rodriguez, and the Cause of World Unrest. Apparently, Carr was called out on this, for in his last book, published posthumously in 1959, he finally reveals his source. Pike explained what is intended to happen in a letter he wrote to his director, Mazzini, of the WRM, August 15, 1871. This letter is quoted elsewhere. It is catalogued in the Library of British Museum, London, England, and has been quoted from and referred to by dozens of authorities and students of the WRM, including Cardinal Rodriguez of Chile. See page 118 of The Mysteries of Freemasonry, Unveiled, 1925, English translation, 1957. 9. The Keeper of Manuscripts recently informed the author that this letter is not catalogued in the British Museum Library. It seems strange that a man of Cardinal Rodriguez's knowledge should have said it was in 1925. William Guy Carr, Satan, Prince of this World. Page 22. Scrolling down here. Let's consult Cardinal Rodriguez's book to pin it down further. Here are the relevant passages. In The Cause, the work of Monsignor Juan concerning the protocols and the work of Wichel are given the names of all the Jews who have been in the government of the Soviet, and thus it is shown that the Jews are realizing their plan, for which they counted on Masonry as a blind and servile instrument. The other indication of the participation of Masonry in the revolution and the present upheaval in Russia is in a letter in La Diabla, I'm not going to read that, but it's The Devil in the 19th Century, 1896, which was written by our hoaxer. Attributed to Albert Pike, this is the letter is attributed to Albert Pike, Sovereign Pontiff of Universal Masonry, assisted by 10 ancients of the Grand Lodge of the Supreme Orient of Charleston, to the very illustrious Joseph Mazzini, dated August 15, 1871. What I have said of the document previously mentioned, the protocols, I say of this one. Authentic or not, the letter had been published long enough before the events not to be an invention accommodated post factum. Its publication is catalogued in the British Museum of London, and the plan attributed to Pike is also in part in La Palladisme of Margiotta, page 186, published in 1895. It is a plan to destroy Catholicism, to throw the Pope out of Italy and force him to seek refuge in Russia, and then, when the autocratic empire had become the citadel of papal Christianity, we, continues the author of the letter, shall unleash the nihilists and atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which, in all its horror, will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery and of the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens, obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries, will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will be from that moment without compass, anxious for an ideal but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view, a manifestation which will result from the general reactionary movement which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. That's from The Cause, page 77 FF, supposedly, according to the quote. This is from The Cardinal of Chile, The Mysteries of Freemasonry Unveiled. I was pleased with the discovery that Cardinal Rodriguez provided adequate citation for further investigation. Some of the new information gleaned includes the fact that 1. Carr quoted directly from Rodriguez's meager one-paragraph excerpt. 2. The latter mentioned nothing about a prediction of 3 world wars. And that 3. Carr was confused about exactly what was catalogued in the British Museum. Furthermore, it appears that Cardinal Rodriguez was alluding to La Diabla, that is, The Devil in the 19th Century, its publication, quote-unquote, its publication, as being catalogued at the museum, not the letter itself, as our next source confirms. At any rate, La Diabla, the devil in the 19th century, is the source of the alleged letter. And of course, the writer of that is our hoaxer. Unfortunately, however, Rodriguez omits which volume. Taxil, Dr. La Diabla, the devil in the 19th century, 2 volumes, Delhomme and Breguet, Paris, Lyon, 1892 to 1894, 1,800 pp. Let alone which page or pages. Therefore, I had no other choice but to consult the secondary work called The Cause. On page 8 in the aforementioned edition of The Mysteries of Freemasonry Unveiled, one encounters a helpful section entitled References and Abbreviations. Item number 19 reads The Cause of World Unrest, 1920. Putting it mildly, both Carr and Rodriguez were hardly amicable towards the Jews, and the next source is no exception to the rule. The Cause of World Unrest is a compilation of articles that appeared in the London Morning Post in July of 1920 in the wake of the Bolshevik Revolution and the publication of the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Whoever penned these texts wished to remain anonymous. Certain researchers, however, conclude that its main authors were Ian Colvin, editor of the paper H.A. Gwynn, and Nesta Webster. The original 1920 copy of the book, as well as a recent reprint of it, precise date not specified, reveals that Cardinal Rodriguez was incorrect about the page numbers. The information on the Pike letter is found on page 50 to 52, as opposed to 77 FF. In the year 1896, there appeared in Paris a curious publication called La Diabla, that's the devil in the 19th century. It was an attack upon Freemasonry and came out in parts, illustrated with grotesque and repulsive engravings. The name on the title page is Dr. Taxil, but it is stated in the British Museum catalogue that the real authors were Gabriel Johann Page and Charles Hax. This explains the catalogue business. The book, with evident knowledge and a show of authority, set out to trace the connection between Freemasonry and revolutions, but its sensationalism and the extremely doubtful character of some of the documents produced brought it into disrepute. Of course, it was written by the hoaxer. Continuing on here. It is now forgotten, and yet it contains a good deal that can be verified from other sources, and some things also which seem to be verified by recent events. In particular, there is a letter, or an alleged letter, said to have been written by Albert Pike, the sovereign pontiff of Universal Freemasonry, assisted by the 10 ancients of the Grand Lodge of the Supreme Orient at Charleston, to the, quote, very illustrious brother, unquote, Giuseppe Mazzini. This letter is dated, in Masonic style, August 15th, 1871, and sets forth an anti-clerical policy which Mazzini is to follow in Italy. The measures proposed, including secular education, the expulsion of the religious orders, and so forth, need not detain us. What is to our purpose occurs towards the end of the letter on page 605, volume 2. The writer explains that owing to the working out of this policy, the Pope may be driven at some future time out of Italy, and the established religion will then find its last refuge in Russia. And the letter proceeds, that is why, when the autocratic empire of Russia will have become the citadel of papal Christianity, Adonai Papiste, we shall unchain the revolutionary nihilists and atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which will demonstrate clearly to the nations, in all its horror, the effect of absolute unbelief, mother of savagery and of the most bloody disorder. Then, everywhere, the citizens, obliged to defend themselves against the mad minority of revolutionaries, will exterminate these destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deist soul will up to that moment be without compass, thirsting for an ideal but not knowing where to bestow their worship, will receive the true light by the universal manifestation of the pure Luciferian doctrine, at last made public, a manifestation which will arise from the general movement of reaction following the destruction of atheism and Christianity, both at the same time vanquished and exterminated. Now, this letter is at least as old as 1896 if it is forgery. If it is genuine, it's as old as 1871. It must therefore be considered remarkable, whether as a forgery or as a genuine document, for it predicts what has happened in Russia, and it claims for its authors that they were preparing to bring about what has happened. H.A. Gwynn, The Cause of World Unrest. Okay, scrolling down here. Now we're getting somewhere. The original book, volume and page number for the letter has finally been identified. We'll look at the actual quote-unquote letter below. For now, however, it will suffice to comment on two things. One, the confusion over a catalog in the British Museum has been solved. And two, the nihilist and atheist quotes are nearly identical translations from Carr to Rodriguez to the anonymous author in The Cause. There are a few minor discrepancies, but this is surely due to Rodriguez's book being translated from Spanish to English. So here are the 3 different translations, and if you want to pause the video, you can now, and you can read these and see the differences, but there aren't many. Okay, I'm going to scroll down. Le Plan des Chef's Secrets. It was precisely 2 years ago that I had acquired the last source in the trail. I don't usually do the interlibrary thing. They give me the runaround and endless excuses. I purchase books online, mostly through secondhand dealers, and La Diabla, that's the devil in the 19th century, any volume, any edition, was a little too rich for my blood. Google Books has indeed scanned the volume, searchable though presented only in snippet view. As at one point I became aware of Michael Bertram's The Devil in the 19th Century, The Hoax of Dr. Batille, Mirabeau, 1973, which includes lengthy excerpts along with critical introduction. After getting the book into my hands, however, I quickly found that the famed 1871 letter from Pike to Mazzini was unfortunately overlooked. Then a few weeks ago, I had an idea. What if I type in 15 out 1871? In the snippet search, just get a semblance of what page 605 of the volume really contains. Sure enough, it was there. And from that tiny snippet view, I gleaned an entire sentence. 15 out 1871, era vulgaire. So I'll just let you see, I have actually used Google Books search in the past. You can search here or search here to find snippets, and they'll highlight your text. So here we are. So that's from The Devil in the 19th Century. Okay. And you can probably figure out what my next step was. I Googled it in the hopes that someone somewhere, surely by now, must have transcribed and posted portions, or hopefully the entire alleged letter. Voila! Exceeding thanks, therefore, goes to Hercule, at a René La Chateau research forum of all places, who, after receiving it in an email, posted the entire chapter found in The Devil, Volume 2, that pertains to the 1871 Pike/Mazzini exchange. I quickly snatched up the text, consolidated it, and compared it sentence by sentence in the search box provided at the Google Books scan. It was a literal transcription. Let's proceed then with the translation of the 12 pages in question before remarking on the merits or validity of its contents or lack thereof. Okay, so this is 12 pages and I'm going to skip it, but I'm leaving the link below and you can read it and just check that out for yourself. I'm going to read what he says about it. But we know that this was written by the hoaxer. Exactly what William Guy Carr was trying to pull, I'll never know. If you've bared it until the end, perhaps you're disappointed to have found nothing about a prediction of 3 world wars, communism, Nazism, and Zionist Illuminati, or anything of the sort. A search through the entire book, utilizing relevant word combinations, turns up nothing either. Instead, what it truly represents is the scurrilous fantasies and militant anti-Catholicism of its author, the impostor Leo Taxil, aka Dr. Batille, who profited handsomely while having a million laughs at the expense of both Christians and Masons, who confessed that his entire corpus of anti-Masonic works, spanning 12 years and representing thousands of pages, including the translated excerpt above, were a complete and utter fraud, a colossal yet ridiculously farcical hoax. It is enough having shown that the so-called Pike/Mazzini letter came from the Taxil hoax, and to have provided a full translation of it. However, if the reader is so inclined, there are plenty of resources to become familiar with all facets of the Leo Taxil case in the above embedded links. Taxil benefited from the atmosphere in France at that time, which was indeed rife with anti-clericalism, occultism, and outright Satanism. The poet and authors of Romanticism also looked upon Satan and Lucifer as a hero, and became more outspoken as anti-clericalism became the norm. The devil had a curious rebirth in the 19th century, writes historian Geoffrey Burton Russell. Quote, conservative Christians of all denominations continued to believe in him, but he was also revived by romantic writers, sometimes as a figure of horror, more often of sympathy or even a hero. Romantics who supported popular revolutions from 1789 onward made Satan a symbol of liberty. If revolutions were against kings and priests, Romantics admired Satan as the enemy of the greatest king and priest of all, Christ himself. Permutations were nearly infinite. In one great poem, Victor Hugo portrays Satan as a lonely hero, cast out from the world, full of love and longing, thrust out beyond the planets and stars into an empty coldness of space. At last he can see only 3 stars. He strains his wings, encouraged to reach a refuge, but one by one the stars die out, and he is left in utter darkness. For some Romantics, Satan was a redeemer who brought humanity liberty at the cost of his own ruin. That sort of comes from the Demiurge belief there. That's from the Satanism Scare, Bromley, Best, and Richardson, 1999. The late historian of the occult, James Webb, has a detailed chapter on the conditions in France during the period, which is highly recommended. The Occult Underground, Visions of Heaven and Hell. Open Court, 1990. Pages 153 to 190. There's also a succinct overview of the Taxil affair, page 144 to 147. Professor Stefan Ludwig Hoffmann describes Taxil's fortuitous situation quite well. Quote, "It is only possible to understand the hysteria caused by Taxil's quote-unquote revelations in Germany, France, Italy, and Belgium if we take into account the contemporary political conflicts between church and the state. Taxil's horror stories were well suited for an era in which people yearned for otherworldly experiences beyond the disenchanted modern world. During the final third of the 19th century, European societies vacillated between modern occultism and the belief in miracles on the one hand, and the belief in Bildung and progress on the other. Taxil's writings initially satisfied the needs of anti-clerics and subsequently those of the clerics. In this way, he popularized the conflict between liberalism and political Catholicism, appropriating many ideas that had long circulated among the Catholic population about satanic lodges, quote-unquote satanic lodges, as well as ideas about sinister Catholicism held by the secular and Protestant Burgertum and Masonic lodges. In occupying both liberal and Catholic positions, Taxil mobilized and intensified the prejudices of both sides. Only in this way can we explain his enormous success, as well as the general popularity of the anti-Masonic and anti-Catholic pamphlet literature between the 1880s and the First World War. The Politics of Sociability, Freemasonry and German Civil Society, 1840 to 1918. Taxil, for his part, had admitted in typical form, quote, "The public made me what I am, the arch liar of the period," confessed Taxil. "For when I first commenced to write against the Masons, my object was amusement, pure and simple. The crimes I laid at their door were so grotesque, so impossible, so widely exaggerated, I thought everybody would see the joke and give me credit for originating a new line of humor. But my readers wouldn't have it so. They accepted my fables as gospel truth, and the more I lied for the purpose of showing that I had lied, the more convinced became they that I was a paragon of veracity. Then it dawned upon me that there was lots of money in being a Munchausen of the right kind, and for 12 years I gave it to them hot and strong, but never too hot. When inditing such slush as the story of the devil snake who wrote prophecies on Diana's back with the end of his tail, I sometimes said to myself, 'Hold on, you're going too far.' But I didn't. My readers even took kindly to the yarn of the devil who, in order to marry a Mason, transformed himself into a crocodile, and despite the masquerade, played the piano wonderfully well. One day, when lecturing at Lille, I told my audience that I had just had an apparition of Nautilus, the most daring affront on human credulity I had so far risked, but my hearers never turned a hair. 'Hear ye, the doctor has seen Nautilus,' they said with admiring glances. Of course, no one had a clear idea of who Nautilus was. I didn't myself, but they assumed that he was a devil. Ah, the jolly evenings I spent with my fellow authors hatching out new plots, new unheard of perversions of truth and logic, each trying to outdo the other in organized mystification. I thought I would kill myself laughing at some of the things I proposed, but everything went. There's no limit to human stupidity." Fiend. End of the article. And of course there's more links in the comments and things like that. There's more interesting discussion here. But basically the letter about the 3 world wars was originally in this, quote unquote letter that was from the Taxil hoax, and then somebody else took that and paraphrased it, and people started putting on quotes. It's just a big old mess. We always have to go to the original source to find out if something is true or not. And in this case, it's just not. And I had an inkling, a few years ago, and that's why I never did a video about it. But even after I do this, people may comment saying that it's true. And it's just not. Maybe I'll do another video about the actual letter, the quote-unquote letter, but it's a hoax, so, there's really no reason to try to take it seriously. But I have different thoughts on it. It's interesting, so if you want to read it, I'll leave a link below, like I said. I hope you found this helpful, better to understand what's going on with this 3 World Wars deal. And even if you try to tell somebody about it, say it was a hoax, they might not believe you, because people just want to think the worst of everybody these days. So I'd rather get to the truth of the matter rather than listen to rumors. So yeah, hope you do too. Thanks for listening.